just a couple days ago, I had the privilege of being out at Mass Robotics with Tom Ryden, who's the director of Mass Robotics, for ribbon cutting with Governor Baker and Mayor Walsh. And it really underscored the importance and really the fantastic situation we have here, where our elected officials are working closely with industry. And so we were thrilled today when Secretary Kennealy, Secretary for Economic Development, Housing and Economic Development, was able to come join us and talk to us a little bit about partnerships between the public and private sector. So I'd like to welcome the Secretary to the stage to give some remarks.
All right, Tom. Well, I think Tom and Mark literally took my entire speech. But seriously, it is great to be with you here today. I want to thank both Tom and Mark for their incredible partnership in all things technology, economic development, and wonderful to be here. Just by way of background, I've been secretary now for a little over a year. I love this role. It is an amazing role that gets me around the state quite a bit. I've been to 110 cities and towns so far. I'll talk about how we see the opportunities and challenges in the economy, but it lines up really strongly with what Tom and Mark had to say. Before I joined the administration 5 years ago, I spent 2 years up in Lawrence working on the turnaround of the public school district. Before that, I spent 19 years in private equity with a technology focus at TA Associates and Spectrum Equity. So I have a great appreciation for what you all do every day to help drive our state's technology economy, as does the governor. It's been an interesting couple weeks for us now in terms of our initiatives in technology. Just 2 weeks ago, I was at WPI to cut the ribbon on their Practice Point facility, which is a healthcare technology research, development, and commercialization facility. The Lieutenant Governor's in Springfield this week at Tech Foundry to announce the inaugural grants for their Tech Talent Diversity Initiative. As Tom mentioned, the Governor's at Mass Robotics earlier this week to cut the ribbon on their new facility, and I was up in Beverly to cut the ribbon on Harmonic Drive's 100,000 square foot robotics manufacturing facility. So we are all in with respect to technology in Massachusetts. As both Tom and Mark mentioned, we've had a great run economically here in the state. We've added now a couple 100,000 jobs since the start of the administration. Unemployment, I think the number I saw was 2.84%. And that's an amazing number. It's well beyond anybody's definition of full employment. It's been below 3% for 4 or 5 months, below 4% for a long time. And we remain, in a lot of ways, just the #1 state for innovation. We're the leader, and we have the highest educated population. We have world-class universities and research centers. We have the highest concentration of workers in the technology economy. We know the things that drive our economy because you're part of the drivers of those. And so we've had great economic success on average in Massachusetts. And as we came up with our economic development plan, we were mindful of a few things. One is the numbers I mentioned, that success is an average rate. And we do have great regional variations, as Mark mentioned. And so much of what we try to do is try to make sure prosperity is broadly shared. That's why I go to 110 cities and towns. That's why we spend a lot of time in all parts of the state. And the other, the challenges mentioned in transportation, talent, and housing, we are so mindful of those every day. I'm lucky I only got responsibility for 2 of those. So I was sitting with someone recently, and as the Secretary of Housing and Economic Development, and they said, geez, Secretary, we think the state has 3 major challenges: housing, economic development, and transportation. I'm like, well, okay, that's good. I've only got 2 of those to worry about. But in any case, those are our major challenges. And so it's interesting, every new term of a governor requires that we come up with a new economic development plan. And so we spent a bunch of time last year traveling the state, getting input for our plan, which the governor signed last month. And the plan is called Partnerships for Growth. And I have to say, first of all, we all love that title on our team because it does speak to how we work in partnerships. We're partners with our municipal leaders, our business leaders, our community leaders, with higher education. It really fundamentally is how we work and think and act and get things done in Massachusetts. So Partnership for Growth, Partnerships for Growth. And it calls on us to do 4 things: build even more vibrant communities, strengthen our economic competitiveness, create even more robust workforce pathways, and respond to the housing crisis. And I will say on that last point, I want to spend time on all 4 of these, but let me touch on housing first. We deliberately put housing as one of the 4 main pillars of an economic development plan, and we deliberately use the word crisis. because that's where we are. And Mark had some great stats of this. The data here is really troubling. We have, from 1960 to 1990, the state produced 900,000 units of new housing. And from 1990 till today, we produced 435,000. And so you look at these long-term trends of our economy and our population growth and all that's happened in the last 30 years, all against the backdrop of housing production that literally is half what it was in the prior 30-year period. And so supply and demand being what it is, what happens? We have dramatic increases in price. So we have the fastest growing rents in the country. We've had the fastest growing home prices. We're number 3 at home value, behind New York and California. Hawaii and California. We're number 1 in rent for a 2-bedroom apartment. And the governor and I like to talk about the fact we love to be number 1 in things, right? We do not want to be number 1 in rent. So it's a real problem. And it hits our communities hard. It hits our businesses. For our businesses, this is a talent attraction and retention issue. I spent the first term of the Baker administration as an assistant secretary focused on economic development and business development projects, and we would compete with other states, for big corporate expansion projects. And you'd sit down and you'd talk about all the attributes we have in Massachusetts, all the great stuff you guys are all doing, our tremendous universities and talent, and that's on one side of the balance sheet. The other is housing, among some other things. But it's something we have to sell against all the time, our dramatic challenges in housing. The data on cost burden households is really pretty dramatic. I'd add to the data point Mark had, which is we have now, I think it's a quarter of all of our renters in Massachusetts paid 50% or more of their income on housing. And then if you look at our competitive states in the innovation economy, you look at how much housing they're producing versus how much we're producing. The latest stats I saw at Greater Boston, we produced 2 units of housing per 1,000 residents. And Austin, Texas, for example, produces 10 or 11. So not only are we less expensive than a lot of our competitors, our peer regions in the innovation economy, we're also being outproduced by a lot. So this is a major, major challenge for us. And we've tried to address this in a number of different ways. One is by making direct investments to create affordable housing. So the governor a year and a half ago signed a $1.8 billion housing bond bill, the biggest housing bill in the history of the state. We make direct investments and subsidies to create affordable units. We need to do that. But we also need this market to respond. We have to, as the governor says, get back in the housing production business. When you've cut in half your housing production in a single generation, you've got to get back to produce more housing. And we think part of that, a big part of the solution, is around local zoning. So going back to 1920, it's been state law in Massachusetts that any rezoning of a property for any reason, it is one, a local decision, and that's good. We've got a strong history and culture of local control here in Massachusetts. But second, it's got to be a 2/3 vote of the local legislative body, whether that's a city council or town meeting. It's a very, very high threshold to get to. And so we've had legislation now before the legislature for a couple of years called Housing Choice. And what that would do is for 9 different types of housing developments, lower that approval threshold from 2/3 to a simple majority. We think that will have the effect of unlocking housing production all across the state. So that's one of our 4 pillars of the plan, responding to the housing crisis. I think it's a critically important part of our economic success. I'll just add that I find as secretary, I get a lot of reports across my desk, and one crossed my desk over the summer, and it made 2 points very strongly. One is that we have an innovation economy that's the envy of the world, and the second is that it is all at risk if we can't produce more housing. Now, the report came out of Northeastern, and it was dated 2001. So we've been talking about this for a long time, and it's time we stopped talking, and time we started solving. So housing, pillar number 1. Pillar number 2, communities. As was suggested before, prosperity is not as broadly shared as we like. We spend a lot of time and a lot of dollars investing in our communities, providing public infrastructure for our communities to facilitate private development. Probably the most powerful tool in our economic development toolbox is our MassWorks infrastructure program. So these are grants to municipalities to build out public infrastructure to make a private development happen. And so we've made $450 million in these grants over the last 5 years to 140 communities, about 200 projects. It's a very powerful tool. It's leveraged about $7 billion in private investment. It is invested in roads and sewers and water and streetscapes and lighting and the kind of basic building blocks of development. So we are actively partnering all the time with our municipalities to understand their development needs and help them be prepared for development and success. The third one, business competitiveness. There's a lot that goes into this. One clearly is maintaining a healthy macro environment, so sensible tax and regulatory policies. In the first term, the governor asked us to do a whole review of all of our regulations, with the consequence that 300 regulations were rescinded, 800 were amended, but trying to make sure we've got a stable tax and regulatory environment. Part of that is also around our outreach to small companies, making sure they get access to capital and space and technical assistance. Part of it is around making sure that the government is easier to navigate. And one of the pieces of feedback we got as we traveled the state to get input for our plan was, hey, you guys have a lot of great programs, a lot of programs. How can we be simpler to work with? How can we streamline our programs and make it easier for businesses and communities to access? But a big part of the competitiveness agenda is around industry clusters. Oops, okay.
That's right.
You're up next, Tom.
I am.
Is how do we identify industry clusters where the state can and should lead? How do we help grow them? And how do we map those to regional strengths, right? And so we've done this, I think, successfully in life sciences for a long period of time. We've had a dedicated strategy around life sciences through the Mass Life Sciences Center going back 10 plus years. And I will say one of our key areas of focus in life sciences is how do we expand the footprint of that sector outside of its sort of natural home in Boston and Cambridge. So we've been very active in helping with life sciences developments in Worcester, way out in Pittsfield. If you sit here and you look west, you know, WPI, anybody from WPI? Hey, there we go. All right. WPI is at the epicenter of a growing life sciences and health tech cluster in Worcester. We're trying to get a Worcester biomanufacturing park off the ground. The governor and I spent the day after the inauguration a year or so ago in Lee, Massachusetts, visiting a company called Berkshire Sterile Manufacturing, doing cutting-edge life sciences manufacturing in the far western part of the state. Look up on the North Shore, a growing life sciences cluster there. South of Boston, the Mansfield Bio Incubator. There's great life sciences activity happening all across the state. So we've had a dedicated strategy in life sciences. Advanced manufacturing, we've committed $100 million in advanced manufacturing R&D the last 4 years. We've had articulated strategies in digital health and cyber and some other areas. And if you think about over the next few years, what are some of these clusters we can identify and stakeholder leadership positions in? And I'll highlight a few. One is financial technology. So we ought to lead in this. We've been a leader in technology for a long time. We are a global financial hub. This is a natural place for the state to lead. There were 35 financings of fintech companies in 2019, $540 million of capital. I formed a fintech working group represented by companies large and small in academia and others. We're trying to increase that convergence of our major financial services companies and our young financial technology companies. I think it's we've had some promising efforts so far with the FinTech Sandbox, Mass Challenges FinTech effort. But these are all areas where I think we can and should lead and we'll be focused on it. The second is robotics. Again, an exciting week this week in robotics, but a place where also we ought to be a global hub to research, launch, and grow robotics firms. Mass Robotics has done a tremendous job. Amazon last year has recommitted to Massachusetts with a $40 million innovation hub in Westboro. It's going to open next year and bring about 200 tech and advanced manufacturing jobs. So robotics is an exciting area, and one, again, we should lead in. And then artificial intelligence. I think an incredible opportunity for Massachusetts. It was, of course, born here back in the 50s. Harvard, BU, UMass, WPI, Northeastern, and others have dedicated AI programs. And there are about 180 AI companies here in the Commonwealth today. So those are some areas. Sorry, I keep hitting this thing here. I need to jump the gun here. And you'll hear from us later on artificial intelligence and our strategy there. The fourth pillar is workforce. And I couldn't agree more with the stats and the sentiment around where we are in terms of our workforce. In a 2.8% unemployment economy, we have jobs going unfilled. I always say our task is not to find jobs for people, it's to find people for jobs. And that's how we're going to continue to grow this economy. So we've done a few things in the first term. One is to make $80 million of capital grants to our vocational technical high schools, where they can buy equipment and create programming in alignment with companies in their backyard and create that talent pipeline for their students. And I think it's been a very successful program where a voc tech school will approach us and say, we have this industry cluster in our backyard, this particular set of companies help us build out the infrastructure to create that training program. I think it's been quite successful. We have sort of more than doubled down on the vocational technical strategy with an announcement the governor made last week, proposing to create what we're calling career technical institutes. And some of this is happening across the state already. We made the announcement at Greater Lawrence Technical, where today the students enrolled in Greater Lawrence Tech will basically be in school from 8 to 2. Okay? At 2:30, there's groups of students from Lawrence High School that come over. They started their day at Lawrence High School at 11, so they're spending part of their day in the kind of general studies high school. Then they go to the Voc Tech. So they're getting exposure to the skills and programming at the vocational school. We're proposing to do that at scale around the state and also add a third shift for adult learners. And again, trying to get people, getting adults re-skilled, getting our young people skilled up for these exciting jobs of today and tomorrow. We've done a whole exercise over the last 4 years of this sort of deep regional planning. We look region by region, look at our educational institutions, the needs of industry, and try to create that greater alignment. And I think it's working today, and we'll work hopefully more in advanced manufacturing, life sciences, technology, and the trades. I also want to talk about a program called Apprenti. And some of you may have heard of this, but it's a program for apprenticeships for technology companies. It's a program started in the state of Washington. It's 3 to 5 months of rigorous technical training, followed by 1 year of on-the-job training at participating companies. These are in roles like software, IT business analysts, cybersecurity analysts, others. They started operating in Massachusetts in 2018. 80% of the apprentices who complete their apprenticeship become full-time employees, and 85% are people of color, women, or veterans. And this idea around growing our technology workforce and growing the diversity of our workforce is something that's critically important for us, and I encourage you to take a look at the Apprenti program. I'd also highlight that our life sciences internship program, we have about 500 interns every year for the life sciences initiative, and those folks are disproportionately, or increasingly, relative to the sector today, women and people of color are much more represented on the internship program. So we're really trying to be creative and thoughtful about how do we grow our talent pipeline in these sectors, and how do we do so in an increasingly diverse way. So that's what I want to share with you today. We're excited about this plan for the next 4 years called Partnerships for Growth. And that is our attitude, that's our mentality. We want to be your partner as you go forward in your plans, and please know the door is always open. Thank you.